Resuming debate, the honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition this afternoon to Bill C-2, an act to amend the Income Tax Act. Bill C-2 would implement the Liberal so-called middle-class tax cut. The biggest problem with the so-called Liberal middle-class tax cut is it actually doesn't cut taxes for middle-income Canadians. I'll get into that in just a minute. Bill C-2 would see that the federal income tax rate be reduced from 22% to 20.5% for Canadians earning less than $200,000. It sounds pretty good on the surface, and I guess during the election campaign a lot of Canadians thought it sounded pretty good. But, like everything, the devil is in the details. What does it actually mean? How much are Canadians actually going to save? The answer, Mr. Speaker, is not a lot. Take, for example, a Canadian who earns between, $62,000 to $78,000. How much would that Canadian save under the Liberal so-called middle-class tax cut? The answer is about $117 a year, or $2.25 a week. What does $2.25 get you in Canada these days? I think you'd be lucky to get a double-double at Tim Hortons. Mr. Speaker, what about then someone, who's making $48,000 to $52,000? How much would they get back in the way of the Liberals' so-called middle-class tax cut? $51 a year, or less than $1 a day. I think you'd be lucky to be able to get a donut or a muffin from Tim Hortons in the morning for less than $1, but yet that's what the Liberals are offering Canadians earning $48,000 to $52,000 a year. But how about those Canadians who earn $45,000? I'd say that's pretty well smack dab in the middle of middle class. How much are they going to get under the so-called Liberal middle-class tax cut? Or perhaps maybe those under $45,000, how much are they going to get? You know what the answer is? Zero. Zip. Nada.
Wow. Shame.
Mr. Speaker, as I say, the biggest problem with the Liberal so-called middle-class tax cut is it doesn't cut taxes for middle-class Canadians. And then, Mr. Speaker, what is the cost of the so-called Liberal middle-class tax cut? Well, the Prime Minister during the election campaign was going all over Canada in his sunny ways and blue skies and saying, well, it was going to be revenue neutral. Revenue neutral. And then what happens is barely after the ballots are counted, the Prime Minister had his finance minister, because I guess he didn't have the courage to do so himself, to say that it's not going to be revenue neutral. Oh no, whoops. It's going to blow a $1 billion hole in the deficit. $1 billion. And then we just found out from the parliamentary budget officer that, it's not a $1 billion hole, it's more like a $1.7 billion hole in the deficit. And that's, Mr. Speaker, on top of the billions and billions and billions of dollars that this government keeps on digging as they blow through the $1 billion surplus that the previous Conservative government gave them. And, Mr. Speaker, who is going to bear the burden of the so-called Liberal middle-class tax cut? You guessed it, middle-class Canadians. You see, in order to pay for their so-called middle-class tax cut, the government is going to roll back TFSAs. tax-free savings accounts. Roll back the most flexible investment mechanism available to Canadians. Roll back the opportunity for students to save for higher education. Roll back the opportunity for families to save for their children. Roll back the opportunity for entrepreneurs to save for their small businesses. Roll back the opportunity for seniors to save for a later day. Mr. Speaker, that's what this government wants to do. They want to roll TFAs back from middle-income Canadians. And, Mr. Speaker, the frightening part is they're just getting started. Because, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and members opposite keep talking about boutique tax credits. They want to roll back effectively all of the tax relief that the previous Conservative government provided Canadians. Canadians, on average, got back $6,600 in tax relief. All of that is in jeopardy because of the Liberals' so-called middle-class tax cut. It's, Mr. Speaker, I heard one of my colleagues say smoke and mirrors. I would say this. I think that what the Liberal middle-class tax cut really is a Liberal middle-class tax cut fraud. That's what it is. Mr. Speaker, the so-called Liberal middle-class tax cut does absolutely nothing in the way of giving back to hard-working Canadians who work every single day to work hard, to move ahead. It gives them back absolutely nothing. Mr. Speaker, the so-called Liberal middle-class tax cut does absolutely nothing. In fact, it takes away the opportunity for hard-working Canadians to save and invest. And on top of that, Mr. Speaker, it burdens middle-class Canadians with billions and billions and billions of dollars of additional debt that middle-class Canadians will, in the end, repay. So, Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely essential, it is absolutely imperative for the sake of middle-class Canadians that Bill C-2 be defeated.
Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Kitchener South, Hespeler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his speech. It was quite amusing, but I just want to point out a couple things that he said. So he said that Canada thought it was a good idea to vote for the tax cut that lowered for the middle class from 22% down to 20.5%. Well, Mr. Speaker, it was a good idea, and that's what Canadians voted for. That's one. And another thing is he said that he mentioned the word fraud in his statement. Well, I think it's fraud when you give a child benefit plan and then during tax time you claw it back during taxes. So another thing, he mentioned a lot of examples of Tim Hortons and giving, that's all that they can get. With the example of Tim Hortons, where that's the only thing that they can get. Well, I'm going to give you an example of a single mother. If a single mother is earning $45,000 and she is raising 2 children on her own, she will receive, under our child benefit plan, almost $2,000 more than the Conservatives. If she's raising 2 children, Mr. Speaker, she's getting almost $4,000 more, and our plan is tax-free. My question to the honourable member is, does he not see that this is our child benefit plan will help the middle class and help this single mother? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, a Canadian earning $45,000 a year will get zero from the Liberal so-called middle tax cut plan. The fact is we have nothing to learn from members on that side of the House when it comes to giving Canadians tax relief. Our government, over 10 years in office, cut taxes of every shape and size. We cut taxes for small businesses. We cut taxes for working families, we cut taxes for students, we cut taxes for entrepreneurs and apprentices. Mr. Speaker, overall, our government cut taxes not once, not twice, but more than 140 times. And you know what it resulted in? The largest tax relief afforded to Canadians in more than 50 years. That is a record that on this side of the House we're proud of, and we're going to fight and work hard to defend taxpayers against the tax and spend ways of that side of the House.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Stormont. The honourable member for Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry.
Yes. Speaker, I want to commend my colleague on a wonderful speech. My other colleague on this side of the House said that it was very entertaining, and it certainly wasn't entertaining, but it was also very informative and very accurate. I have a lot of respect for the wisdom of my colleague, and I would like him to maybe shed some light. We've heard a lot of talk from both sides of the House about deficits. Now, their deficit is projected to be a deficit this year in the upcoming budget on the 22nd of March of close to $30 billion. Now, in previous governments, in our government, we did have deficits. Now, we think it was a deficit for a reason. Now, I'm not sure that this current deficit that's being projected at $30 billion in 2016, I wonder if my colleague could share some light on the difference between the projected deficit we're going to have this year and deficits from past governments. Thank you.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Well, I want to thank my colleague for that excellent question, because when our government came to office in 2006, we repaid $38 billion in debt. It constituted the largest debt repayment in Canadian history. That's the record of the previous Conservative government. And my friend is quite right. The Conservative government, did run some short-term deficits as a result of the need for short-term stimulus spending in the face of the worst economic recession that this country has faced in more than 50 years. But the spending was short-term and targeted. And so by 2015, when we passed the torch to this government, we handed them a surplus of $1 billion. And so that's the difference. And now we see a government that's running billions and billions of dollars of deficits, and we're not even officially in a recession.
Resuming debate, the honourable member.